talkguilt.com today. And tonight we are continuing to monitor the police activity that is still underway in Maine tonight as that manhunt is going on for the shooting suspect, Robert Card. We're going to bring you the updates as we have them. Here in Washington, you saw today President Biden ordering White House flags lowered to half-staff as a mark of respect for the 18 victims so far. On that note, I want to turn to someone who is running to be in the White House. Florida Governor and 2024 Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis here live for his first interview on Source. Thank you, Governor, for being here on this tragic shooting that has happened in Maine. You put out a statement earlier today saying, while the facts are still coming in, this could be another example of a failure of our nation's mental health system. Do you believe that a red flag law like the one in your state would have prevented this?
No, but I think we have mental health adjudications where if you are adjudicated and you're committed, then you're somebody that would potentially be out of circulation. I mean, I think he obviously was a well-trained individual. There were these flags when he was training. He did go to the hospital. I think the question is why wasn't he committed beyond that? We'll probably figure out going forward. But clearly, this is a guy that's very dangerous because he's got the training and then he seems to have had a breakdown.
Yeah, but if the red flag, why do you not think the red flag law, a red flag law like the one that's in Florida that we've seen been used?
Because he already had firearms. He's a well-trained individual. I think the idea that he was just I think these are things that he probably had. So in this case, I'm not sure. I think an involuntary commitment, though, would have kept him off the street, and I think that would have probably done the trick.
But if he had these concerns over the summer, I mean, he was saying that he was hearing voices. We don't know if it was voluntary or involuntary. We just know that he did go to a facility, a medical facility, for about 2 weeks. And you look at the red flag law in your state, that is something that it was passed before you were governor. But when you were running, you said that you would have vetoed that. Do you not think it's been effective in your state?
But that's a different situation than a mental health. So we've always had, and I've always, if you're not mentally competent to own a firearm, that's something different than red flag. What red flag is people would go in and say you may be a danger. So you could have someone lodge a complaint. Different states do it differently, oftentimes with not adequate due process. But I would say that's different from the mental health. I think most people agree that if you're not mentally competent, with rights come responsibilities, and exercising the rights means you have the mental competency. So I don't think it's an issue with red flag. I think red flag has been abused because people can just lodge a complaint. Sometimes they'll take somebody's firearms. And here's the thing, it's not even Second Amendment as much as a Fifth Amendment due process issue. Can you take someone's property without having an adjudication? So I think it's different. I don't think it would have mattered. In this case, I do think a commitment, an involuntary commitment, would have done the trick.
I think there were questions about whether it would have been a factor here. Obviously, we're still learning more about this, but I mean, this is a law that you have in your state. Does it work in Florida?
Well, in a situation like this, it would not be.
Just generally, does it work in the state of Florida, though?
You know, I was not something that I supported because I was concerned about the due process rights of individuals. Now, our crime rate's at a 50-year low. I don't think it's because of that. I think it's because that we've supported law enforcement. We have strong laws to hold criminals accountable and put them off the street. So I'd say if you look at why is Florida's crime declining while it's going up in places like California, I think it's probably more for our overall approach than that.
If you don't think it's effective in Florida, you don't think it's contributing to those lower rates, why is it still in place? Why don't you move to repeal it? You've got a Republican supermajority.
Because the Republicans passed it in the legislature before I was governor. I mean, they all voted. Oh, right, they all voted on it. I was a candidate at the time. There was different restrictions that I thought violated the Constitution, so I said I would have vetoed the bill. It passed overwhelmingly, and there's not an appetite amongst them to reverse their votes, basically, in what they did just a few years ago.
Has any of it, since being governor, changed your opinion on how effective it is? I mean, there is a Polk County Sheriff, Grady Judd, who you are very familiar with. He's a conservative. He's a supporter of yours. He thinks these red flag laws in Florida are actually very effective.
I think you have different perspectives on that. I mean, I think Grady and some of the other sheriffs like it. I think some others have said that it's not something that's effective. But Grady, understand, he's a big supporter of the Second Amendment. So he is not using that in a way to try to infringe people's rights. He's following due process, and he's going about it in a way that does respect that. I think you see how some of these things get put in other states, and it's more of just an end run around the Second Amendment because they just don't like the underlying right to begin with.
So point blank, though, do you think that red flag laws are effective generally?
think there's been data to suggest the red flag laws have been effective. I mean,
Even in Florida?
I don't think. I mean, I think it's anecdotal when people say this or that. But I think what's ultimately effective is holding people accountable, either through mental adjudication if they're crazy, or convicting them when they're committing crimes. I mean, a lot of the people that commit crimes, I mean, obviously a shooting like this, catastrophic, a lot of people. The typical crimes that are being committed where one or two people may get killed, they don't get as much press, but it's almost always somebody who's been in the justice system multiple times, and then they finally commit a really serious offense. So identifying those people and holding them accountable when they're committing crimes, that is the way you reduce the crime rate.
So it's safe to say a President DeSantis would not sign any kind of national red flag law?
No, I don't think that'd be appropriate at all.
So what is, if you're president tonight and you're the one lowering those flags to have staff at the White House, what's your solution?
We're going to do two things. I think the mental health issue in our country, part of it is we do need more institutionalization. There are some people who are dangerous to society. A lot of them get put back on the streets. That will require more resources, but I think that's appropriate. And it's not, this is obviously a very serious. There's other crimes. You talk to people in jail, sheriffs. A lot of the people that end up in the justice system have mental problems. And so we've not done a good job with that. Now on the other side, on the crime, we're going to hold people accountable. If you commit a gun crime, you're going to go away for a long time. If some of these prosecutors in these blue states are letting people out,
no previous history with any kind of gun crimes.
Yeah, but if you look at most of the crimes that are committed in this country, it's people that have been in the justice system before and have gotten a slap on the wrist. That's happening all over this country, and we will hold people accountable.
But about this situation specifically, what would you do? I mean, he had no prior criminal background.
But he got referred to a mental hospital. So
if it's not a red flag law, which there is not one in Maine, what's the mechanism for taking the guns away from someone who says that he's hearing voices and is threatening to shoot something up?
The mental is not about the red flag. When people are adjudicated, if there's a commitment mentally, then that is something that means, okay, you have to have responsibility to exercise rights. It's not the same thing as a red flag.
But the red flag is for if there's troubling behavior, if someone's saying that they're hearing voices, they have guns, that is what the red flag law in Florida does, and they can go to a law enforcement.
Not quite that, but I think when you're talking about the mental, you got to be serious about, okay, recognizing warning signs. You have to have systems in place, and we actually do a pretty good job of this in Florida, where you see that because we've had situations in the past where you take this stuff seriously.
But you
don't just, that's not what it is. It's for, like in schools, if you have somebody that's making threats, we take those very seriously. And I think what happens in these cases is you see that there were a lot of warning signs and people didn't act on them. So you have to act on them.
People did act on them, and that's why he went for 2 weeks to a medical facility, because the other reservist with him reported that he was having issues and threatening to shoot up the base.
Okay, and then what happened, right? Did they follow through?
That's why my question is if the red
more?
flag law would be helpful here, and you're saying you don't think it would. You've mentioned mental health resources. We hear a lot of that from Republicans after a mass shooting. But what specifically would you do if you're president with that funding? What's the program? How much money is it? What does that actually look like?
I'd want to have more facilities for involuntary commitment. I think that we used to do higher levels of involuntary commitment. The pendulum swung a lot to the other direction. I'm not saying it needs to go all the way back where it was, but I do think that we need to recognize that there are some people whose behavior is a danger to community and danger to society that right now are getting put back on the street. And I want there to be a mechanism to do that. I think realistically, you have to have the resources in place and the facilities in place to do that.
So instead of taking someone's guns away, you think putting someone in an institution is the solution to what we saw happen in Maine. Is that right?
If he was institutionalized, he would not have been able to commit this offense 100%. I mean, that goes without saying. If somebody's back on the street, then they can always hurt somebody. And it doesn't mean that you just have, it's not like you take one firearm, like they can't get others, or they can't use other things to be able to harm people. When people are they can do a lot of damage, especially someone like that has military training.
Yeah, I just think some people would raise questions about, you're talking about his rights if you take guns away, but if he's being institutionalized. But I want to talk
No,
about.
but there's a process for that too. I'm not saying you don't have a process for that. I'm not saying you just snap your finger and do that.
Of
We
course
have a
there
long
has to be a
history.
process for that.
Well, we have had a long history in this country of handling mental health in different ways. I think now we've gone a little bit more liberal. I think you see that affecting a lot of problems that we have in society. And so, but that, if he had been involuntarily committed, then clearly this would not have happened. You can't say that with anything else.
Well, I think people would say, is that the solution, or is it something with restricting gun ownership? But I want to talk about Israel because.
But you can't, though, if you have been adjudicated mentally, you are not able in this country to
I understand
purchase a
that is the
firearm.
federal.
Yes.
That is the federal law. Is there any gun restriction that you would sign into place if you were president? Any law restricting gun ownership?
Restricting Second Amendment rights? I'm going to uphold the Constitution.
Just asking if there's anything. On Israel, though, as I mentioned, there are 2 cargo planes that you had set up that your office has said today, taking supplies to Israel, drones, helmets, other things for first responders to be using. If you were president tonight, as President Biden is doing, sending about 900 U.S. forces to the Middle East, a lot of firepower that we've seen in the area, do you think that is the right step? Do you agree with him?
So I think the most important thing is to stand with Israel, both publicly and privately, and back their ability to wipe Hamas out. Go to the Hill, uproot the tunnels, do everything they need to do so this never happens again. That's the most important thing. And I think that's pretty much what they want. Now, I don't think it's necessarily America's fight. I think we should support Israel. How we get involved, now clearly we have an interest with the hostages that are there, some of whom are American, and I would work with Israel to be able to recover those folks. And I'm not sure what Biden's using those people for. I do know he's got people in Iraq and Syria who are being targeted by Iran. They're kind of just sitting ducks. I'm not sure that that's the best policy either.
So what's the best policy? Removing troops from Syria or ordering a U.S. military response to that?
Well, I think what's the rationale for them? I would only have them there if there was a clear American interest involved. I don't know the Biden's articulated that, but let me just say this as president. If somebody harms a U.S. service member, harm one hair on their head, they will have hell to pay if I'm president. We're not going to let people take pot shots at our military members. Iran should know that. Anybody should know that. We are going to defend our people.
And that would be a U.S. military response?
It means we will defend our people, and we will do what we need to do to say, you don't mess with American troops.
Governor Ron DeSantis, stick around. We have a few more questions for you on Israel. We're going to take a quick break and be right back after a quick moment.
Now accepting donations of land, homes, buildings, or any kind of real estate.
Join Poppy and Phil on CNN This Morning, tomorrow at 6 Eastern.
And Florida Governor in 2024, Republican presidential candidate Ron DeSantis is back here with me. We were just talking about Israel and the flights that you have arranged for getting Americans out of Israel, something that was obviously a huge issue in the early days of this war. If you were president, what would your plan be to get the hundreds of Americans who are in Gaza out?
Well, you have to marshal assets that we have. A lot of this stuff would be clandestine. You got to work with the Israeli government to coordinate to see what you can do. But those hostage rescue efforts those are very sensitive things. Those are very high risk maneuvers. But clearly, when we have Americans that are being held by a terrorist group, we would marshal resources to be able to rescue them.
But not even just the hostages. I'm talking about the hundreds of American citizens who were in Gaza, and of course they can't get out now. Egypt is not letting anyone out. Israel, of course, is not letting anyone out of Gaza. What would you do to get those Americans who were living in a war zone?
Obviously, I would want to help. Just like we helped in Florida, there were Americans that were stuck in Israel. They couldn't get out. We ended up bringing almost 700 home. We're all Americans, and most of them were Floridians, and but we didn't do only Floridians. We understood that there's others that needed. But I think the interesting thing about what I saw, because we greeted the first flight that we brought back 271 people, 91 children. So you literally having families come out with their dog, their kids, and then they're very happy to see my wife and I when we greeted them. But one of the ladies told me, she pointed to her 6-year-old daughter. She said, and they're from Florida. Daughter just kept saying, "Mommy, I don't want to hear the rockets. I don't want to hear the rockets. I want Florida. I want Florida." So we were able to get that done.
But what would you do to get the Americans out of Gaza, though?
Well, I would give them transport, but you know, I
But
need to, I would
have to
need to
talk
know
to
the
their governments
intelligence.
there. I mean,
I
what
would
would
need
that
to know
look
the
like?
intelligence. I would need to know the battlefield. I would need to know all that information. But I would definitely let it be known to Hamas that harming Americans is very high risk for them, and that they should cough them up.
Everything we've just talked about, what you would do if you were in office and a mass shooting happened, what you would do if you were in office and what happened in Israel has happened, none of that is necessarily matters if you don't become the Republican nominee, if you don't go against Joe Biden in the race for the White House. You obviously are still far behind Trump in the polls. Obviously, there are multiple polls showing that. You've criticized him on what he said about Benjamin Netanyahu. You've criticized him on abortion. But you never talk about Trump himself. What do you make of Trump's character?
Well, look, I mean, at the end of the day, to me, I'm about results and I'm about outcomes. I mean, Donald Trump's well documented the different things in that regard. For me, it's who's going to be able to deliver the results. I'll be able to do that as the president. Now, he did some things I give him credit for, but he also promised things that he didn't deliver. So the question is moving forward, how do you actually get America on the right track? How do we reverse this decline? And I think we need a new leader, someone that can serve 8 years, two 4-year terms, and someone that's going to be ready on day one to really be energetic, have some vitality and some vigor, and get the job done.
But that's not answering the question about his character. What do you make
Because
of
it's not a
Donald
concern.
Trump's
It's
character?
not a concern of mine. I mean, I think,
Why is it not a concern?
think-
You're running against him because you clearly believe that you should be president over him.
Well, that's because I think I'd be a better president than he is. But I mean, I don't need to take pot shots. I mean, at his character. I mean, some people like to do that. I focus
It's not
on
a pot shot. The character of the president matters.
why
does it
I
not?
would be a better president, and I think the reasons is because I have a demonstrated record of delivering on 100% of my promises, like I did in Florida. I'll be focused. I'll be disciplined. I'm not going to be distracted. It's not going to be about my issues. It'll be about the American people's issues day after day. And we have the prices are too high. The interest rates are too high. The border's wide open. Our military's not strong enough. We have crime in the cities, big bureaucracy run amok. We have all these problems. We need to solve them, not talk about them, not
But why is
smoke
that
and hear
message
about them.
not resonating with Republican voters?
I think it is when you get on the ground in Iowa, for example. So there's 99 counties. The tradition is to do all 99. They call it the full Grassley. I've done 83 of the 99. A lot of these rural counties, there'll be counties where there'll maybe a few thousand people. We'll get 100 people to show up at an event. You shake the hands, you answer the questions. That's not something you'll necessarily get to see in polling. That's something that comes out when people make their decisions to caucus. So we're doing it the right way. I'm going to be the only candidate that does all 99 counties. We've just started similar in New Hampshire on there on Tuesday. I was with Governor Sununu. We did 7 different events, town halls, house parties, retail stops. That's what you got to do. You got to show up. Donald Trump's not willing to show up. He's missing in action right now. He doesn't show up. When he does show up, he reads off the teleprompter for 50 minutes, and then he gets back on the plane and goes home. As voters are more keyed in, as we get closer to the holidays, you're not going to be able to get away with not putting in the work. So we're going to put in the work, and we're going to get the job done.
Well, right now he is getting away with what you say is not putting in the work. I mean, he's leading the polls.
Yeah, but that's because he's the most famous person running, 100% name ID. He's the person people know. When you actually drill down in these early states, clearly he's got some that'll vote for him no matter what, but there's a lot more that aren't going to vote for him in the primary. Then you got a lot of voters who, they like his policies, they like a lot about him, but they are willing to vote for somebody else. So it's incumbent upon a guy like me, go out and make the case. I'll tell you, we were in South Carolina last week, did a bunch of rallies, shaking hands after. Every other person said to me, "You flipped me." Now, I didn't ask them who they flipped, but I'm pretty much sure that they flipped from Trump to me. So that's what you have to do for the
Are
next
you
3 months.
moderating the way that you're running? Because you seem to be running to the right of Donald Trump initially, signing that 6-week abortion ban, signing that permitless concealed carry. You were making sure you finished your legislative session in Florida before. Now you're talking about going for the voters who
constitutional
don't
carry
like Trump.
that's like a majority of the states have that. That's a normal mainstream
No, but
Second Amendment position.
You're
So, but
deflecting the point of itself is
the
that
thing
you were
is
initially running to the right, and it seems like you're moderating. Is
I
that the
don't
case?
think I've changed. I think I am what I am. I think I'll run the same now like I will next November. But here's the thing. I'm more reliable on policy than Donald Trump, and Republican voters, I think are starting to see that, and we'll show that. I've delivered more on American first principles than anybody in the country, and not just this most recent legislative session, all through my time as governor. So we'll see that. But here's the thing I think is true. I have shown an ability to be bold, to do big things, but then to actually win independent voters. In Florida, we won by 1.5 million votes. I mean, we won independents by 18%. Donald Trump would not be able to do that, and we need somebody that's going to be able to win the election. Very important that you get that done.
And you don't think Donald Trump can beat Joe Biden?
I don't. I mean, I think that.
Would you endorse him if he is the nominee?
Well, I've already said that I signed the pledge. I'm supporting the Republican nominee.
Do you think it's real?
Well, for me it is. I mean, I think when you sign something, I know some people don't do that, but when I agreed to participate in debates, I knew what that meant. I knew whoever comes out of that process. But here's the thing. I'm not just going to take my ball and go home. I'm going to follow the process, respect the people's will. I think ultimately, they'll make the judgment that I'm the best foot forward, and I think we'll get it done. But look, at the end of the day, I'm not going to just cry in the corner. I mean, I think Biden needs to be defeated, and I think a Republican needs to do it.
Okay, so that's a yes. Governor Ron DeSantis, thank you for your time tonight. Thank you for joining us for the first time here on The Source.
Thank you.